All right, at 7:35 p.m., I call the Rules and Judiciary Committee to order. We will start with the call of the roll. So let's see, Senator Stevens.
Present.
Senator Bull.
Present.
Senator Mercedes. Senator Vashikidze. Senator Vo.
Here.
I am here. Senator Piscatelli.
Here.
Senator Underwood. Senator Morris. Senator Addy is present. Senator Vernon. Senator Troutman.
Here.
Senator Krepok. Senator Bass.
Here.
Senator Robbins. Senator Freeland. Senator Guilano. And Senator Ellis.
Present.
And with a quorum present, we will proceed with our agenda. Let's see, is there anyone here for public comment? Seeing none, can I hear a motion to add to the agenda USRs 104-307 and 104-306? These are to confirm members of the Honor Court and Cabinet, respectively.
So moved.
Can I hear a second?
Second.
Hearing no objection, those will be added to the agenda by unanimous consent. We will start with the hearing of USR 104-307. Vice President Robinson, I think if you'd like to introduce anything in particular.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, to members of the committee. I just came over from the Oversight and Advocacy Committee. We had a nice conversation about a few things over there. And I do want to begin by saying thank you so much to everybody on this committee who has helped us move through so many external appointments and other appointments this year. It's because of you that we've been able to confirm more folks than ever before. A little bit of context as to why we are doing this now with these folks. We have a new director on in the Office of Student Conduct, Jenny Spanberger. If you haven't met with her, very interesting person to chat with. And she is extremely in favor of student self-governance, which is great. And so as a result, if you actually check the instrument, it says that members of the Honor Court shall be confirmed by the Senate of their respective constituency. So although this has not been traditionally done in the past 2 to 3 terms, we're going to begin doing it now. And that means confirming all of the Honor Court leadership, which we've done throughout the year, deputy student attorney generals and vice chairs, now all the way down to regular members of the Honor Court, most of whom are first years. So these folks were hired, a vast majority of these folks were hired back in August, September, October, and have been going through the extensive training to become active members. And once they are confirmed by this committee and by the Senate, they will begin their work in the Honor Court. So I thank you for your consideration, and I'm happy to take any questions that you may have.
And I'll just briefly add, I had a conversation with the Honor Court Chair and Attorney General about this back in September, and we had initially decided that it wasn't necessary to confirm these individuals, but just out of like an abundance of caution and like honestly, like it's very nice for Senate to get to confirm more people. We're going to go ahead and do it. Since these are regular Honor Court members, I didn't ask for like each of their individual resumes, given that there's 24 of them on this resolution. So don't hold it against them that we didn't get their resumes this time. So with that, I'll leave it to the committee. Are there any points or motions on the floor?
I would just make one request that you all amend 2022 to 2023. Just noticed that slight issue. If you would.
If you're talking about like the dates on the left-hand side, we can just do that without, like I can just take care of that. It's not a problem.
Thank you.
Yeah. Are there points or motions with regards to USR 104-307? Is there a motion to suspend the rules and report favorably by or report without prejudice?
So moved.
to reporting favorably or without prejudice?
I would say reporting favorably.
And let's see, is there a second?
Second.
Right, seeing it, the motion being properly moved and seconded and hearing no objections, we will be reporting USR 104-307 favorably by unanimous consent. Let's see, we'll now move on to USR 104-306, a resolution to confirm a co-director of the Academic Affairs and Professional Development Department. Let's see, Vice President Robinson, is there any statement you'd like to make?
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Unfortunately, we've lost one of our excellent team members here in the executive branch, one of our co-directors of academic affairs and professional development, Zainab Benaya, as she's studying abroad in Spain and Portugal. So we hope she enjoys that, but there is still work to be done. So we are happy to be nominating Ryan Smith to be elevated to the position of co-director. Ryan has extensive experience in student government. This will be his, I believe, his third year being involved. Specifically in the executive branch. He also holds a number of external appointments. Overall, qualified individual being elevated from a position on that team to the co-director position. We appreciate your consideration and hope that you'll get a chance to work with him if confirmed.
Thank you, Vice President Robinson. Are there any points or motions at this time?
Motion to report favorably.
Is there a second?
Second.
Right. The motion has been properly moved and seconded, and hearing no objections, we will report USR 104-306 favorably. Thank you all. Let's see. All right, we'll now move on to the rest of our regular agenda, with the first item being the consideration of USR 104-305. This one is being introduced by myself. So some background here. The Supreme Court contends that they cannot be impeached at the moment. I disagree with their interpretation of the Constitution, but I'd rather not play this game of fighting interpretation. So we're just going to amend the Constitution and settle the issue. This amendment does a couple things. It basically outlines a procedure for impeachment that is largely in line with the process for removing the student body president. And it also just clarifies the scope of the Supreme Court's bylaws to be only over the internal issues of the Supreme Court, and just further clarifies that the restriction on Supreme Court office justices from holding positions in the student government applies to the entirety of the student government and not just their constituency student government. It's like a pretty small amendment that is meant to just like clarify things that I think we take as pretty obvious. And I'll open up to any questions. Vice President Robinson, you're recognized.
Would you scroll back up, please, to the impeachment section? I'm curious about the specific language, and I know that you're a person who's extremely intentional about it. Repeated and egregious violations. Would that mean that they would have to do an egregious violation multiple times? Or would there be a way to where it could be repeated? I don't know. I'm curious about that word in terms of, would one egregious violation of the student constitution not be enough?
Yeah, so this is actually something that the graduate students had questions about. They have received identical copies of this and the other amendment that we're going to hear tonight. And I'll be going to their Senate next week to present these as well. My thought was generally like we would pass a version as the undergraduate Senate, and like the grads would pass some version as well. And then in JGC, we could do whatever reconciliation is necessary between the two. But that is something that they pointed out as wanting some kind of language change there. I just haven't had a chance to look at it yet.
That sounds good. Thinking like a graduate student is always a compliment, so I appreciate it.
Are there any further questions or any motions?
Motion to report favorably.
There is a motion to report favorably. Is there a second?
Would you be amenable to a motion to report without prejudice?
Yes.
That has been accepted. Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Hearing no objections, we will report USR 104-305 without prejudice by unanimous consent. Move on to our next agenda item, USR 104-304. This is an identical resolution just dealing with the Board of Elections. The Supreme Court and the BOE have the same language, except like one deals with elections, one deals with the court. And so what this does is just clarify that these guys can also be impeached, and that their bylaws only cover internal matters, nothing related to like actual elections regulation. There, like I said about the last one, there's been a copy of this given to the graduate students. They have requested some changes that we'll make over in the graduate senate, and we'll let JGC handle doing reconciliation between the two versions that are passed. So if there are any questions, I'll yield to them now. And if there are no questions, is there a Senator Vernon? If you're speaking now, I can't hear you. If you said anything, then so like the language as it's written does not like mean that they have to commit more than one violation. It is a statement as like if they have, it's a statement as to the effect of like if they have committed several violations that wouldn't necessarily rise to the level of like malfeasance or nonfeasance. Like there's a lot of provisions of like the Constitution and this and the codes that like could be violated. And like any single violation of them is like necessarily high enough for impeachment, but like the way we do impeachment is you don't write down every violation of the law that has been committed. What you do is you write down the charge, and like the charge would be like repeated and egregious violations of the student constitution. Like we do this for a lot of reasons, because we don't want bills to be necessarily long, and because like violating like, and because like listing every single violation of the student code would take is like not strictly possible. So like you pick from one of those three charges and just kind of put that on the resolution. It's not really like an actual like it's like a placeholder basically. It's not something that can be like interpreted to an extent. It is like largely up to each Senate to determine what constitutes repeated and egregious violations. Like it's a political matter, not so much like a question of like legal interpretation. This is something that like the real Congress has dealt with. Like when it says like there are people who like argue like unironically that when it says like when the Constitution refers to like high crimes and misdemeanors, that like you have to have committed a high crime and a misdemeanor, when that's like not the that's not what that means. Like it doesn't matter. It's up to Congress to figure that out. So like yeah. Any further questions? If not, are there motions?
I move to recommend without prejudice.
Second.
All right, hearing no objection, we will report USR 104-304 without prejudice by unanimous consent. Okay, we'll move on to USB 104-303, also introduced by myself. So there was a small issue when we approved the last elections code. There was like a typo made at some point along the way. Like basically there was like 3 or 4 versions of the bill being emailed back and forth. And we think what happened is somewhere along the way, we downloaded the wrong file and passed that. So there are some references to like that need to be removed. And then like there's an issue here with like the date that like financial statements are due for referendum campaigns that didn't get fixed. It's like a very small, very technical fix just to like deal with a couple small issues. So I'll open the floor to questions, and if there are any motions there, that can be made too.
Motion to report favorably.
Is there a second?
Seconded.
All right, the motion has been moved and seconded. Hearing no objections, we will report USB 104-303 favorably by unanimous consent. We will now move on to USB 104-302. This is another elections-related bill, and basically, what this bill does is it is meant to do one thing, and that is the version of the elections bill that was passed into the joint code was slightly different than the version passed into the undergraduate code. And it is my belief that these codes should be identical. It makes all of our lives a lot easier. So what this bill does is it goes through and it makes sure that everything that was changed in the joint code version of the elections bill is going to be identical in the undergraduate elections code. So like there's a handful of changes, like changing what the referendum spending limit is, clarifying how ballot propositions and ballot referendums work is like the majority of what this is. And like striking references to things that don't exist anymore, basically. So yeah, that's the bill. Are there any questions? And if not, are there any motions?
Motion to report favorably.
Is there a second to reporting favorably?
Second.
All right, hearing no objections, we will report USB 104302 favorably by unanimous consent. We will now move on to USR 104301, a resolution to amend the standing rules. This was introduced by Senator McClanahan. I do not believe Senator McClanahan is present, so I will go through this as best I can. I am going to stop sharing for a minute. He just sent me over a version of the resolution that is much better formatted than what is currently in the Senate Drive. Basically, like what's currently in the Senate Drive is it's formatted how like the U.S. Congress writes bills, which basically doesn't like actually show it's being changed. It has this where it says that like it lists out what's supposed to happen in like a very different way. This is like an actually like much better version that I'm going to send to everyone right now. So here is the reformatted version in the chat for everyone to look at. Okay, it's weird. Here we go. Okay, so to my understanding, what this does is basically just adjust the agenda for how, or adjust the standing rules to make committee of the whole less broken. And I'm very happy someone is actually undertaking this project because I had meant to do this myself at some point, just didn't feel like getting around to it. So he clarifies, looks like he's also clarifies a handful of other things, which is how vetoed legislation works, which that's probably good. Oh yeah, we don't vote like that. All right, so yeah, there's also some other technical changes, which seem to be pretty reasonable. But if okay, so let's see, what are the changes here? Okay, so he changes the threshold for entering committee of the whole from 2/3 to a simple majority, which that seems pretty reasonable. He also allows for bills to be passed out of committee of the whole to be placed upon the consent calendar via unanimous consent mechanism. He also changes a lot here. Let's see. Yes, a motion for discharge. So basically what this talks about is if a bill or resolution has failed in committee, it is possible to like have it considered by the full Senate. The previous way for doing that was you had to have like a written petition that was signed by a certain number of senators. It seems as though he's just changing it to a system where a motion can be made during the meeting and then we can enter discussion onto that motion. That seems to be the bulk of what is in this bill, or resolution rather. I would ask the committee to postpone voting on this, given that the senator isn't present and can't explain things that are currently in this resolution. And as much as I can read through what the words say, I can't really speak to the intentionality behind them. But I'll leave it to the committee to decide what happens tonight. So at this time, if there are any points of discussion, if there's a motion or discussion or any other motions, they would be in order at this time.
I motion to enter discussion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we are now in discussion. Or any points of discussion?
So I have a point of discussion.
Okay, you're recognized.
My concern primarily with the whole, instead of changing it from a written petition to enter the full Senate to this new mechanism, I don't love that. I think things die in committee for a reason. I don't know. I'm just not a big fan. I would be curious to see what the rest of the committee thinks, but I think this is a potentially problematic change.
Thank you, Senator Vernon. Are there any further points of discussion? Senator Addy is recognized.
Considering that the person who wrote this bill isn't like present, I think it wouldn't like be in good faith to like approve or like kind of reject it flat out without like hearing the reasoning behind it. I think that we should just like postpone or like table the bill until like a later meeting.
Thank you, Senator Addy. Are there further points of discussion? If not, can I hear a motion?
Motion to table?
I know it's the treasurer wants to say. You are recognized, Treasurer Grodzki.
A motion to table may not be made for such a length as extends beyond the adjournment of a meeting. You are looking for a motion to postpone.
Fine. I amend my motion to postpone until our next meeting.
Is there a second on the motion to postpone?
Second.
Second.
All right, and hearing no objection, we will postpone consideration of USR 104-301 to our next meeting. All right, so let's see. I have a question. Does anyone know if O&A has finished consideration of the resolutions 298, 299, and 300? Any way we could find out if they have finished their consideration of those three items? Like it is at least my preference. I'd rather not hear these resolutions tonight if they're being like still in consideration from O&A. I'd rather not like have parallel discussions on them and like there'd be like two sets of resolutions referred to the floor in one night. We'd have to, I don't like at that point, I'm not really sure what we would do if O&A and R&J have made like conflicting amendments or like have two completely separate versions of these resolutions on the calendar.
I was told that it would be sent to both R&J and O&A, but I don't really know anything else about the status of it.
Yeah, I can probably clarify. I agree with what Andrew's saying. I did send them both. I didn't realize they might be both meeting so close in time, but from my understanding, they are currently under discussion over in O&A. So I can understand the desire to not have conflicting discussions right now, if that makes sense. David, does that make sense? So right now, currently O&A is looking at the same resolution. So we, if we had two people, we don't want to have two committees come to different conclusions with different suggestions at the same time. Does that kind of make sense?
Yep. So can we just have it go through O&A only?
Yeah, if that's what you'd like. Yeah, I'm more than fine with that. Having looked at it a little bit more. Their O&A is taking a look at it right now, and if it's up, Chair, they were sent to Chair Gary, but if Chair Gary, if you think that's the best idea, if you agree with that, then I don't have a problem with having just O&A look at it.
Yeah, I think that like if O&A is in discussion on it right now, I'd rather not have two versions go through, but we can talk about it like after the meeting's done. Yeah. So I think for now, what we'll do is we won't consider these items tonight since they are still being heard by over in O&A. So that exhausts R&J's business agenda for tonight. Are there any announcements from anyone? I don't have any announcements. Just this is going to be our regular meeting time for the semester. If this doesn't work for you, please communicate that to me as soon as you can. Seeing no other announcements and no other business items, is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, the committee stands adjourned at 7:59 p.m. Thank you all for coming. Hope you all have a good night.
Thank you.